Now, on the 4th of December, it's the Scottish Government's turn to put their spending plans before Parliament. And given the Government no longer has a majority of votes to rely on, that budget will have to woo rival MSPs to get their backing. Public Finance Minister Ivan McKee is here to hopefully give us some insight into where his government may be going. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You have an extra £3.4 billion now in the coffers and in the wake of this budget. Does that make your budgeting process easier?
Well, we need to unpick that a bit and understand what that's all for. There's £1.5 billion extra for this year, but there's only 70 million of that's for capital spend, which creates some challenges. That's still a significant reduction on where it was last year. On top of that, when you adjust for inflation, there's another 800 million for next year, but most of that is to take the capital spend back to where it was last year. So there's really only an extra 300 million next year on top of what we've secured from the UK Government this year. And of course, as you've identified in your the discussion earlier, the national insurance payment for public sector workers is, we estimate, about 500 million. And Anna's SSR was unable to answer the question about whether the UK Government would cover that, and certainly the Chancellor.
Have you had any clarification?
Well, no, we haven't, and we've written, Shona Robson's written to UK Government to seek clarification on that. It seems that part of the UK Government is saying one thing, but Rachel Reeves, who's the Chancellor and the boss at the end of the day, is saying another, indicating that it's already included in the money that we've been allocated. So that's a big unknown.
And in terms of the money for this year, there's 1.5 billion. Is that already spent? Is that already factored into the cash that you have had to claw back?
Well, as I say, there's unknowns round about that because we need to wait for the consequentials to be finally calculated. The 500 million national insurance would knock a significant hole clearly in that. We had to dip into the Scotland Reserve money this year, as you know, to cover some of the expenditure. And
that's gone for next year?
Well, that calculation, the money that's come through now, allows us to review that and see what the situation is. But, as I say, because of the public sector pay increases, well-deserved public sector pay increases that weren't funded by the UK Government at that point, the money we're getting now...
The Commission says that actually you didn't budget effectively for those.
Well, I can't talk about that. The money that's coming through now effectively covers those public sector pay increases, and it was absolutely right that we made those pay increases to support public sector workers in Scotland.
Rachel Reeves has decided that making some people pay more tax is the way forward. Some have suggested this brings the UK into line with some European economies, something the SNP have said that they would like to see more of. So is this an option for your government, perhaps more taxes next year?
Well, we'll look at the budget when it comes round, but I think...
well, you must be looking at it now.
I'm not going to... We'll make the announcement when that comes round. And I'm not going to make any announcements just now, as you'd not be surprised to know about where we're going with decisions in the budget.
Well, have we reached the point where raising taxes any further, might be counterproductive?
I think that is a very strong consideration.
Right, so potentially no tax rises because of that,
for that reason. At this point in time, obviously.
Well, let's talk about business rates, because the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has announced a 40% relief on business rates for the retail, hospitality and leisure industry. Some here say the Scottish Government should pass that on, at least the 40% rate relief announced in England. Will you do that? Well,
we've managed the rate system slightly differently in Scotland because of Scottish situation. We've had the lowest...
Much to the annoyance of some.
Not entirely. There's some that are better off as a consequence of that. We've got the lowest poundage rate in Scotland compared to the rest of the UK for 6 years in a row now. We've got the most generous small business bonus scheme, supporting more than 100,000 small businesses.
UK Hospitality Scotland have said that their businesses here are being forced to trade at a considerable disadvantage to their counterparts.
And I'm saying that there's, across the piece, there are many businesses that are better off as a consequence of the decisions on non-domestic rates that the Scottish Government has taken. But having said that, we are looking at the situation with regards to retail, hospitality and leisure, understanding the importance of the sector to our high streets. Again, that will be a consideration we'll weigh up when we come to put the budget together.
The UK Government has put growth at the heart of what they're trying to do. We know the Scottish Government has talked about similar things in the past, and growth's important here too. So, given that the Deputy First Minister has the economy brief, what is her role in the budget process?
Well, she's hugely engaged in the discussions we're having. Clearly, Shona Robson's leading on that with myself from the finance portfolio, but working closely with all government ministers and very closely with the Deputy First Minister, Kate Forbes, in terms of how we make sure the economy is powering forward.
Will there be specific growth measures in this budget?
Well, let's see, as I say, when the budget comes forward, but we're very focused on making sure that Scotland's economy, which has to remember, we've now got higher average earnings in Scotland than the rest of the UK as a consequence of the economic performance in Scotland. And it's important that we continue to drive that economic performance forward, continue to attract more foreign direct investment, again, outperforming the rest of the UK for several years in a row now. Kate Forbes is at the heart of making that happen, and we're working very closely with her to make sure this budget is focused on economic growth.
On the winter fuel payments, your government opposes the means testing, so you've now got extra cash. So will you restore the payment?
Again, I'm not going to make announcements on your programme this morning. You'll not be surprised to know, but we are obviously looking at options to see what we can do in the budget. As I say, we're looking at the budget announcement, but we're also looking at the situation as to where we are with regards to this year as well.
Well, the responsibility for the payment is transferred to the Scottish Government soon, although it's been delayed by a year. Mm-hmm. You said at that point that it would be universal. Are you sticking to that?
Well, as I said, we need to look at these numbers. That decision that was made by UK government earlier in the summer obviously took significant amount of money out of the pot we had available to provide that payment, with clarification coming through now on these numbers for this year and indeed for next year. We need to look at that in the round and make some decisions. Well,
ultimately, is it still your ambition, though, to have this as a universal payment?
I say I'm not going to commit to that on this programme, and the budget will be along in a few weeks, and then you can find out where we are, but it's absolutely something we're considering along with all the other things you've asked us to spend money on this morning.
Well, that's the deal of being in government, isn't it? Tell us about these negotiations. You've been talking to other parties. You're now a minority government. How is that going?
Discussions are actually very well. The different parties all have their own perspective on what their priorities are. We've had some high-level discussions in terms of the principles they would like us to operate, and several of the parties are now coming back with very specific proposals on the things that prioritise them. That process will gather pace now that we have seen what's in the UK budget, and it gives us a bit more clarity in terms of what the scope we have to manoeuvre with is. We're having another series of negotiations over the next few days, and we'll see where that takes us.
Which specific parties do you think you're more likely to do a deal with? Because all of them have had various issues with your priorities in the past.
Yeah, well, we're talking to all parties, all 5 of the opposition parties, and we'll see where those discussions land. It's too early to be discounting anybody at this stage, and as I say, some of the discussions have been at a fairly top level so far, but we expect that to gather pace and more specific proposals to come forward that we'll consider.
Are there any particular areas where you might be willing to make compromise?
Well, as I say, it depends on what comes forward from specific parties, but some have already made proposals in the public domain. Others are having those discussions with ourselves directly. But we have had good discussions, I say, with all of the parties. I've been very pleased with the way that process is going so far.
The Greens were pretty angry, of course, at the time when the power sharing deal came to an end. Have those wounds been healed?
Well, I think the Greens have been very practical about this. I understand the political reality and the economic reality. They've got priorities that they would like to see delivered, as have other parties. They have made those clear in the public domain and in discussions with us. And I know that Ross Greer, who's leading for the Greens on this, will be coming forward with more proposals in the next few days. So we're looking forward to receiving that, as we are with the other parties, and we'll consider what we think is best for Scotland's economy and for the people of Scotland.
Do you accept what Anna Sarwar was saying a little earlier in the wake of this budget, that, as he puts it, the age of austerity is over?
Well, it's certainly a step in the right direction, and it's better than what we had before, but it'd be hard to be worse than the party of Liz Truss, so you've got to give them credit for that, but there's still quite a ways to go to get back to redress the damage that's been done to the fiscal situation over the last few years. So we're absolutely willing to work with the UK government to take that forward.
And what specifically?
Well, I mean, the initial thing, going back to where we started this conversation, we understand where we are with this £500 million on public sector national insurance contributions. And that's important clarification, and that'll be a real test of where they are. We obviously, as you pointed out, I think everybody's disappointed that the UK government has taken the winter fuel payment away, disappointed they haven't followed through through on getting rid of the 2-child caps. There's a number of areas where they haven't delivered, but we're happy to work with them on that. And also on some of the things they're bringing forward. We still need some clarification around their replacements for the shared prosperity and the levelling up funds, where that's going, working with them on investment zones, working with them on green pots, things that can help take Scotland's economy forward.
I spoke to Anna Sarwar about the US election. We're just a couple of days away. Do you have any view on who should win here, given Donald Trump's business interests here in Scotland?
Well, I think that's not a relevant factor. I think Donald Trump is a disaster. To be honest, when you look at it from the outside, I think that the Democrats perhaps haven't run the best campaign. They should be much further ahead than they are. And on an international issue that's hugely important, frankly, I've been very disappointed with both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on the tragic situation in the Middle East and Israel-Palestine. So I think neither of them are I think, are the perfect candidate. Donald Trump very far from it, and Kamala Harris has got a lot of work to do to, I think, on the international stage, deliver what we would hope to see from the leader of the free world. But it's very, very close, and we shall find out on Tuesday.
Well, look, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme this morning, Ivan McKee, the Public Finance Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
For your time.
Thank you.